Hello, here we are in London, which is one of my very favorite cities in the world and one of the many places that I call home. It's this incredible melting pot of culture and people from different nationalities and different places, and all of that makes for a wonderful breeding ground for arts and culture, and it has this incredible theatrical history. So I was very lucky to grow and learn and become the director I am today within this landscape, which starts with lots of fringe theatres and goes all the way up to the West End. I'm Julia Burbach and I'm an opera director. Only recently I did a show of the Walküre at the Hackney Empire, which was part of an opera festival called Grimeborn, which is a famous fringe opera festival. So that's really important because it gives singers and performers the opportunity to do grand opera in a setting and on a scale that is unusual. And we're very proud that we were able to bring this to a part of London that usually doesn't have that experience for the performers and for the audiences alike. Similarly, I was a staff director at the Royal Opera House and worked on many productions there, major German repertoire like Tristan and Isolde and The Ring Cycle, but also Italian repertoire like Così and Trovatore, and I was very lucky that I could learn many of the things that I implement now in my work on such a big scale with so many famous and established artists. So come along on the journey and I'll tell you how it all started. I was really lucky to have easy entry into the art world. My mother is a chanson singer and an actress, so we spent our lives growing up seeing her perform and vocalize and be backstage. My grandfather was also an operatic singer and later became a dentist, but even so, that really helped to take the fear away and be able to imagine embarking on an artistic career. And that's how all of that started. Even so, I studied different things at university, but I, inspired through going through performing arts school, I then started directing and choreographing when I was in uni, and then the directing bug really bit me. The first show I directed was Romeo and Juliet, so straight into the deep end with Shakespeare, but I really loved it and enjoyed it, and I've not been able to think of really doing anything else since. So Romeo and Juliet was a really important moment for me as the theatre bug kind of bit me. But let me tell you how I got there in the first place. So growing up, I was very lucky that we moved from place to place, and I was exposed to lots of different cultural influences. And I think as challenging as that sometimes was, because you always had to make new friends and adapt to different environments and languages and schools, and it was also something that really shaped my passion for storytelling and narrative. And the transient culture of all of that also is something that, of course, you find in the theatre community. So it's had this family feeling that I felt really comfortable with. So in a way, I replicate that on every show that I work on, and that's really fantastic. So we were in London as a family. That really resonated with me, and I could see that all the things that I was looking for were kind of falling into place in that city. To UCL to study things that were actually nothing to do with theatrical arts. I did a BA in History of Art and then an MSc in International Public Policy, because the plan was to do something possibly in political science. But I knew that they had really fantastic dance and drama societies, and that was the plan all along, and I joined those, and that's how I started directing and started being able to explore my craft and see if I was good at that and how that felt. And out of those experiences in a completely amateur, safe academic environment, I was then able, after university, to start working in lots of little pub theatres and fringe theatres and doing internships and placements and working one's way up the ladder in London theatre life. So one of the challenging things with choosing to pursue an artistic career that I've been learning how to handle over the years is that, of course, there are no rules and there are no guidelines, and you don't know exactly how to go from A to B. So after university, I started trying to direct as much as I could, small fringe theatre plays in as many different places as I could manage. And I was also really interested in film, so I started working as a small production assistant on major film sets and as a runner, and I worked in offices, so I did lots and lots of different things, and in retrospect I'm really happy I did all of that because it's really sort of shaped my outlook and my flexibility and my ability to adapt quickly to different things. So that's all been really good. At the time it was sometimes quite scary and difficult, and to know what's coming next. And I remember there was a moment where I was very frustrated with the film world and I hadn't met the right people that were supportive or inspiring. And then actually my mother said, why don't you apply to opera, because they direct too. And in fairness, I hadn't really thought about it, even though I'd always grown up with opera and singing. And then I did, so I sent my CV. Those were the days when you would send your CV to hundreds of places. And I was lucky to get what is called an observership, so like an unpaid internship on a production. The first one was in Leipzig on a production of La Clemenza di Tito. And the second one was actually at the Bayerische Staatsoper in Munich on a production of Die Basariden with Christoph Loy, who then became really, really important in my life and for my development in opera, because he sort of took me by the hand and took me along on lots of big shows around the world. And he was an artist I found very inspiring, but also somebody who created a safe work environment where I felt that I could grow. He was very demanding, it wasn't easy, but he was a great artist. So I learned a lot with him, and that is how I got into the Royal Opera House with his shows, and then was able to continue working there on other productions with other directors. Something that's really wonderful about working in opera is that it's completely international. In an average room you have, I'd say, 10 different nationalities and lots of different languages spoken. And because of the way that I grew up, I feel really at home in that environment. Because usually when you're the only person with a very culturally mixed and diverse background, you feel very lonely and isolated if the others don't have the same experience. So the transient quality of opera land, should we call it that, really, really suits me, and I love that very much, and I find it really inspiring, and it pushes me to learn other things and to want to explore other things. Having said that, I think, and it's certainly what I've known to be true in my experience of putting on shows in different kinds of venues, big established venues, but also small fringe venues and site-specific places like nightclubs or warehouses or other things. I don't think that opera is this elite product that is only reserved for very few who have a specialized education in music or other things. I think it's something that is accessible to absolutely everybody. It's about storytelling. We all know and love storytelling. All you need to be is human, and we all respond emotionally to music. And the music is, of course, the great emotional spinal cord in all opera productions. So I think the packaging of opera productions sometimes is a hindrance, and certainly the ticket prices can be, but I don't think that the art form as such poses a problem at all. And I've done productions where people who'd never been to an opera production would come to the very first time and loved it and had a fabulous time. And others don't like it. I think it's also important to understand that you don't have to like it. It's just like going to the cinema. You don't have to like every film that you see, and it's okay not to like it. Not everybody has to like opera. There's no necessity for that. For a director, actually, or from my perspective, directing opera is really interesting because you have lots of different strands that you can connect the story to. So of course you have the music, which is usually the most psychologically honest, deepest way of decoding the story. Then of course you have the text, what is called the libretto. And of course there's many ways to analyze that and interpret that. And usually it has to be done in relationship to the music. So for instance, if let's say the phrase is "I love you," but depending on how that is placed with the music, it could be the truth, or it could be a lie, or it could be a quote, or it could be lots of different things. And then of course there's the body of the performer. And from my days of doing lots of choreography and dance, I have a great passion for movement, and I think a lot of opera directing is psychological movements, and it's amazing how instructive and telling the body can be in helping us understand what a person is feeling or hoping for or wanting. And so my style is sort of quite choreographed, physically speaking, and I find that very rewarding. So I'm lucky that I have that background so that I can use that in my style. So there's lots of ways of how that can be helpful. For instance, usually whether you walk in line with the music or against the music changes the meaning significantly. And lots of other different things like that. And that, I suppose, is very particular to opera directing, which you don't have in the same way in straight theatre or film, which has other interesting and exciting aspects to it, but that is very particular to opera directing. And in a nice way, it combines and ties together many things that I did growing up, not knowing that it was going to lead to opera. So my experience in film and in theatre and in dance, and in a nice way, it kind of ties all of that together. And yeah, that's a wonderful feeling. Directing is, of course, deeply personal. It's always a journey of self-discovery in every production. So even though I'm not really on stage, how I experience human relationships and how I observe them and how I feel connected to that particular story is always very much present. And the people who know me can always tell when they see my shows. And of course you enter a relationship with the audience when you put on a production between the performers and the viewers. That is very special, and it's something that I'm aware of, and it's something that I really enjoy to foster. I always think of my audiences as intelligent, as emoting, as demanding, and I take that very seriously. So I try to find a very, very honest, very meaningful, very relatable core of the story, and I use that as the spinal cord, and I stick to that. And usually when you stick to that, the audience follows you. And when you don't, and when you confuse them, then you lose them. And I guess that is fair enough. I think Hitchcock said, an audience that is confused is not emoting. So it's important not to confuse. That doesn't mean that you can't do challenging things. You certainly can, but you just have to be careful in terms of how you do it. So I think that relationship with the audience and the performers has a lot to do with a balance between what people expect and the unexpected. Of course, what you expect is to be told the story in a coherent way, but also there is a big part of the unexpected that is important. And I think that has to do with the power of the imagination. So I always try to construct my pieces in such a way that the imagination of the audience is an important aspect of the whole artwork, and that you take your audience by the hand and you lead them down a path, and then you allow them to explore certain things in the story with their own imagination, which of course is probably greater and more personal to them and more exciting than anything we could ever represent on stage. So I think that's an important, very important part of the theatrical arts. I think as much as the unexpected is important in that relationship between the performer and the audience, it's also true to everybody's personal journey. At the beginning of embarking on this career, I found the unexpected and the aspect of not knowing and not being able to plan, all of those things very scary, and they are still sometimes scary, but I think you learn with time passing and with having more experience to embrace that level of, should we say, abstraction in your life. And so I'm not sure exactly where the journey will go, but I'm open to be flexible and adaptable and to embrace the fact that everything's often unclear and you don't know what's going to happen. And within that, hoping to grow and learn. In many ways, I really think that I'm still at the beginning of that journey, even though I've been doing it for easily over a decade. And yeah, but I guess in many ways it's only the beginning.